this is it. This is the end of the line. The marshes and the water, the tides and the creeks and the mud and the birds and the big, wide open space and huge skies. Where do I begin? I've been here 34 years now, living on boats, and originally it was kind of an escape from the rest of the world because of the restrictions in the rest of the world, simply, and it was kind of a freedom. This is the last freedom, the sea. Of course, my father was a fisherman, and I'm a history nerd, an archeology nerd in particular. I do love the plants, flowers, and flora and fauna, if you like, of the marsh. Another thing that I do is wild living. My dad kind of taught me a bit about hunter-gathering. I've had a fascination with ancient history and prehistory in particular, and I sometimes go out and think, okay, let's see what we can eat. And this is where the other freedom comes in, a massive freedom. It's freedom from money, because this is one of the last environments that I can live. And I've been all over England, and I can go out, I can lay a net, I can rake cockles, winkles, mussels, oysters, razor shells, whelks, scallops, stick a couple of crab or lobster pots out and catch all manner of seafood. And then there's samphire, spinach, chickweed, alexanders, and a whole host of plants, wild plants that I can eat. And so one of my big pleasures in life is to go out on a hunter-gatherer trip or a gleaning trip, and maybe even camp on the sea wall on the other side of the village so I'm away from home, and just do that. Just take, cooking utensils, water and lots of buckets and survive. Maybe just take a loaf of bread just in case, And if you've got a bunch of friends with you and you're doing it, that gives you a really, really close idea of what a hunter-gatherer party was about tens of thousands of years ago. It's a knowledge that is unique to a coastal place like this. That's it. Having had PTSD and learning about high-functioning autism, learning about mind mapping and mind palaces, Sherlock Holmes. Mine's a library, and I have hundreds of books that I'm learning to store away. I'm tidying up my mind at the moment and recovering from PTSD, etc. And I'm putting everything onto shelves. And when I hit 40, I decided to actually start using my brain. And then in the process, hundreds of things have opened up. Hundreds and hundreds. It's overwhelming at times. And the other thing that I'm doing with this is I'm trying to help other people understand the depths of the human mind. Autism is a kind of a group of disabilities, so to speak, but they're also a group of superpowers. All my knowledge is stored in the trees, in the landscape, in the ground. I know most of the history of the marsh and the foreshore, and one of the best ways to do an interview with regards to the whole big picture would be to go for a very, very long walk and spend a whole day at it. Ah. Hello there. That, I presume, is the man. I think there's some pollen about. Hello, mate. Hello, Max. Lovely hammer. Probably one of the most well-loved dogs in the locality. I do like black Labradors. My first dog was a black Labrador, and he was quite magic. Hello, Frank.
Today, the universe has been against me today.
Hi, how are you?
Bearing up under the terrible strain. And you, sir? You're here.
Oh, we're here, yes, and it's a beautiful day.
Hello there.
you recording that? My name is Frank Turner, and I'm a singer and a songwriter and a touring performer. And I grew up in Hampshire, and then I spent most of my adult life in London. And last year, in the midst of a pandemic, my wife and I decided to get out of the city and found ourselves landing on the Essex coast on Mersey Island. And I'm new to the area, and I'm trying to learn about the history of it because that's the thing I like to do. And it's a place that's replete with history. And today, I'm going to be fortunate enough to be having a walk around Tollesbury with Flavian and learning and being educated about where we are and who was here before us. I have Google Earth.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
There we go.
Have you got the satellite?
I don't know. Yeah, that looks pretty satellitey.
It does a bit. Go on, keep
There's the British
home
Isles.
in,
We're
home
going
in.
in. Let's see if I know where we are. There we are. There's Colchester.
Tollesbury.
Clacton is Tollesbury. There we go.
There we are.
So,
Keep going.
Keep going. I'm in the right place
Yeah,
here?
you can see home in where we
Yeah,
are.
we're here somewhere, are we?
We're there,
Oh,
aren't
no,
we?
we're there. Tollesbury. Oh, I see. Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going. We're going to see us if we zoom in far enough. Be able to turn
Wouldn't that
around
be
and
fun?
wave.
What we're going to see is where we're standing, I'm hoping.
Right.
This is the seawall where we are now. That's that barge there. So we're just there, and this is where we want to look. Now,
Right. Okay.
if you look here,
Yeah.
you can see aerial photographs of
There's-
circles.
Yeah. There's depressions or something in the land, like.
Okay, and
Craters
there's
or
another circle further in the field. You've got the better view to. There we are.
Yeah. There we are. Yeah. Okay.
What we're looking at is potential Iron Age, Bronze Age enclosures that I've recently
Really?
discovered because they've just
because
updated
of,
this.
because of Google Earth.
And so this is part of the reason why we're walking around here now.
Right. How old are we talking here?
Uh,
Educate me on my time periods.
Okay, we're talking possibly 1000 BC,
Right.
possibly even as early as 1500 BC,
So a long, long time ago.
a little while back.
Yeah, a little while back. I mean, that's verging on like the Egyptians and that sort of business, is it not?
Yeah.
Well, the Egyptians were in business at that point in time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've
Okay.
but not that long.
Not that long. Okay. And that's just there.
Yes,
As a point.
yes.
Okay.
And if you look at this area,
Yeah.
you can see this creek here.
Mm.
It actually used to wind up through here. This is reclaimed marshland.
Right. Okay.
And then wind all the way to the Scout Hut car park. The ground starts rising just past the edge of the Borrow Dyke. That would have been sort of the limit of the tidal reach. And of course,
Okay.
Bronze Age and Iron Age people loved living beside water. They had houses on stilts,
Right.
built houses and dwellings on handmade islands called cranogs. Mersey is full of Bronze Age artefacts.
I've been attempting to sort of educate myself about that a little bit. Am I wildly off mark if I start talking about things like Doggerland and that kind of thing and rising sea levels around that period
Not
of
that
time?
far off, Mark.
Okay, because my understanding would have been that there would have been that whole thing of a propensity to live in liminal spaces next to the water and that kind of thing might have been introduced by the fact that sea levels were rising, so people kind of got used to the water coming in. Is that right? Or
There's a bit of that, yes.
right? Okay.
As well as the east coast is sinking.
Right.
And Doggerland was kind of destroyed around 15,000 years ago.
Oh, okay. Right. So much.
But it's been a slow process up
Sure.
until sort of the end of the Bronze Age, Iron Age period.
Right.
There were still a couple of islands out there.
Right. Okay. And there
So-
would have, and a culture presumably would have sort of at least descended from one to the other in some way, like
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay.
There
I hadn't
was-
realised I was about 10,000 years out.
Well, no, you weren't that far out. But of course, it would have been a continuation of the same group of cultures influencing
right,
each other.
yeah.
There would have been trade. There would have been people going in vessels, skin-covered or hollowed-out dugout canoes,
Right.
or even birch bark canoes and the likes.
Wow. Made
Uh,
locally, presumably.
yeah.
Right.
Whatever you could find.
Is that a thing that people still know how to do?
There are some people that still know how to do it. I've even got a book on birch bark canoes, but that's not my field. I'd much rather build a coracle or a curragh.
Okay. Okay. Which are?
They are skin-covered vessels.
Skin-covered vessels.
The coracles are still used in Wales, or parts of Wales,
Right.
especially on lakes. And curras were the Irish skin-covered vessels, of which one of the most famous ones was the Brendan of the Brendan Voyage.
Right, okay, yeah.
And there's places in Ireland where they still actually use skin-covered vessels.
And what type of skin? Whose skin?
Cow.
Cow skin?
Cow
Not
skin.
the skins of their enemies anymore. Have you sailed in one?
No, I'd like to.
Right, okay.
They're incredibly lightweight. So they were a kind of a trellis work of interlocking pieces of ash with a central keel and a gunwale, a top plank, and with the skin stretched and sewn over, as well as impregnated with various things like beeswax, linseed oil, or various types of fat.
Right. And are these vessels for sort of coast hopping, or are they going to go further out to sea?
They're still used in Ireland for fishing. They can
Right.
go further out to sea. And as Tim Severin proved in his Brendan Voyage, he proved that the Celtic people of Ireland could have discovered America.
Discovered
before.
America, yeah, okay.
That's-
But that presumably would have been a terrifying voyage. I mean, it's
Yes.
terrifying enough in a modern steamship.
It's probably
Okay.
one of the most amazing adventures in modern history.
Right, okay.
And he's done lots and lots of other adventures. He died last year, unfortunately.
Did he make it to America in a currach?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And he left Ireland, coast hopped to Scotland and the Shetland Islands, and then went to the Faroe Islands, where he picked up a Viking, if you like, Trondir,
Right,
or a name like that, meaning something like thunder or Thorian.
right, okay.
And he'd got the traditional hunter-gatherer skills of the island, and all along the way he was catching different birds, and at one stage harpooned a pilot whale, which towed them a couple of miles.
Right, I was going
It
to
was
say,
incredible, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, this guy was learning to speak English as he went, but he was the perfect man to take on the journey.
Yeah, sure. So did they go Iceland, Greenland, and then Nova Scotia kind of thing?
Yes,
presumably?
yeah.
I guess we sort of collectively underestimate people from that period of... Because there's all the Polynesian islands and that kind of thing. There was a long period of time when people couldn't figure out how they could possibly have got from one place to another. But it turns out seafaring
Yeah.
was, I guess, more advanced than we thought it was.
I've been kind of looking at the Polynesians
Right.
recently, and one of the things that guided them was the flight of birds. And so they would watch the terns in particular on their migratory paths. And they even had rituals surrounding it. They even elected a birdman every year to do the job. And so they would watch for their arrival and then their departure. And as they left, they knew, because the weather was good enough for the birds up in the sky, the wind would be good enough for them to
Sure.
sail.
And the birds have to land at some point, so
Yeah.
they're not going to just fly into the great unknown.
Exactly. So
indefinitely.
you can follow the birds in order to know where the islands are,
Sure.
and stop-off points and safety places and
Yeah.
places you can pick up water. But the other thing they sailed by was by an absolute brilliant, developed and evolved knowledge of ocean currents.
Sure.
I've done it once in the fog down the Blackwater, just knowing the local currents,
Right, okay.
and it was so thick that you couldn't see anything. But I looked at the currents in the water, and I had a timing device with me, which helped. They would have probably just counted. Somebody on board whose job it was to count. Of course, you had an understanding of the time of day by the
Yeah.
angle of the sun in the sky at whatever part of the planet you were on,
Yeah.
latitude.
That's amazing, sailing down the Blackwater by the currents. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was really scary.
Yeah.
In the fog.
I can imagine. I've been in Mersey for 10 months now, and occasionally look at the sea and go, that bit's moving in a different direction to that bit. Probably won't go and swim over there today.
Yeah.
But that's about as far as I've got.
Yeah, swimming's more dangerous in Mersey the further eastward you go. It is.
So this is what, a seawall or a man-made
Yeah.
earth bank?
These seawalls were started around the end of the medieval period at the earliest, mainly between the Middle Tudor period and the middle of the 16th century, although there was constant reclamations going on.
Sure. Presumably in a way that was quite similar to what was happening in Holland
Yes.
at a similar period of time. I mean, do we think that there were similar people involved?
In fact, we used to import Dutch people to come over here for
Right.
their expertise.
Okay, yeah.
And if you go to Canvey Island, there's a couple of the 17th century Dutch cottages that have become museums that you can visit.
Oh, wow.
They're ever so quaint.
Yeah, but that's amazing. And so it's a conscious bit of geoengineering, really.
Yes.
And this is the reclaimed land to our left.
Some of it, those enclosures that I think are there,
Yeah.
they kind of overlap this field.
Right.
Silt attracts moisture and the rest of the fields dry out. Where there was a ditch, for instance, and it's silted over, that ground will stay moist for longer, and therefore, if it's a circular ditch, you'll end up with circles that appear as a dark patch
On Google Earth.
on Google Earth and aerial photographs.
Yes. And how long have you been walking around here?
Well, I'm 54 now, and I was born here. And when I couldn't walk, my mother and father were pushing me along here.
Right.
And we'd do all sorts of hunter-gatherer missions, from blackberry picking and slow picking to
Sure.
picking the samphire and the spinach off the seawall. This, incidentally, is spinach. If we'd have been here about 2 months ago, we'd have had a lovely little, sort of about 10-inch high cluster of leaves that we could have picked and eaten. It will go to seed and it will die back, and then in another month, maybe 2, there'll be another cluster of leaves. And this plant, the sea spinach, or sea beet as it's also called properly, does that about 3 times a year.
I like spinach.
I'm not going to make any jokes about Popeye.
It makes you strong.
Apparently. That's only because they missed a decimal point on the evaluation of what the iron content of it.
Really?
And this is a relative of the sugar beet. It's in fact the same plant, not developed.
Right.
And so it's my theory that our ancient hunter-gatherers would dig up the rhizomes, because that's one of the very rare forms of carbohydrates in prehistoric diets.
I heard you talk about hunter-gathering, I suppose. Could you survive out here for a period of time without recourse to modern conveniences?
I did actually live for 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, without money in my early 20s.
Okay, just to surviving off hunter-gathering techniques.
I'd like to try and do it again. I often had the idea of a sort of a little community of people where everybody's got their own individual skills that put into the collective, as well as everybody having the sort of general skills. The survival.
I think I'd be the useless member of the collective at the moment. I'd have much to learn.
You'd be surprised.
Okay.
Everybody's got something to offer, that's the thing.
Yeah, I could sing a song. I'm not sure how much that's going to contribute. So beautiful up here. Like when we were first going to the island, going down to where all the houseboats are, I said to my wife that it was the closest to like the New Orleans bayou that I've ever encountered in England. It's got that kind of vibe, the kind of swampy, marshy vibe, and then the houseboats. I love it. Are those what we were looking at on Google Earth?
Yes, these.
Yeah.
Just one there, and there's one in the middle of the field.
Right.
There's actually 4 that are very visible, and possibly a 5th and a 6th.
But it's so nuts that it's still visible now, in any shape or form.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, the action of human hands nearly 3,000 years ago or whatever.
I think we've got the advantage of this being low-lying ground,
Sure.
and of course it being a little bit too swampy to build on, at least not houses. And also, we're cut off from the rest of the world.
Of course. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm just sort of always fascinated by, like, what thing that any of us do is still going to be visible in 3,000 years' time. I'm not sure that when people were building these, they would have had any conception of that. And nor should they have done, but it's a wild thing to think about. Is there anything, any mark, even just a piece of earth you move from one place to another, that's still going to be there 3,000 years' time?
It's a bit crazy.
Yeah, but it's encouraging in a funny way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's a bit of fashion for time capsules, isn't there, where people are deliberately burying.
Yeah. I did a time capsule when I was at primary school in the
All right.
mid-1980s. I cannot for the life of me remember what went in there. Probably something to do with Kylie Minogue.
Okay.
So she will be preserved for all time. and future archaeologists will discover the true story of Kylie and Jason.
Oh yeah, I can vaguely remember that.
They
now.
will raise an eyebrow at our culture. It's so peaceful out here.
Yeah,
I was on the M25 this morning. This is much
I don't
better.
envy you.
Was it worth the drive?
It was, well, I mean, so one of the things I've found since moving down to this part of the world and to the island specifically is that, like, it feels like a contained world to itself. And I've been there less than a year, but, I mean, first of all, I'm doing that kind of horrendous Johnny-come-lately thing of now being, like, super Mersey about everything, despite being a very recent arrival. You know, I rejoice in referring to all my friends as mainlanders and shaking my fist at them as I do it. But in seriousness, though, there is a vibe change when you get down here. And for me, crossing the Strood onto the island, it's a sea change, you know, and you just sort of feel different. And this here is a similar vibe. It's very, very peaceful. And, you know, I spend quite a lot of my professional life kind of in vehicles and then in crowded rooms and in cities and all the rest. And it's really nice to get away from that when you don't have to be there.
Yeah.
And here we are. There's a lot of birds. There's a big bird sanctuary here somewhere, is there not?
There's two massive bird sanctuaries. Okay, we've got one over there that's just the other side of the seawall. It's sort of almost on the horizon.
Yeah.
Is the mile-long bird sanctuary,
Which runs across...
nature reserve.
Right.
And then there's, on that side of the creek over there, you've got a 2 mile long one. We do have 3 of Britain's largest birds of prey that get about here. The red kite, buzzards and the marsh harrier. And I have seen Montague's harriers and hen harriers.
Are you a twitcher?
No, I just like to know what's going on around me.
Well, which I suppose might be how a twitcher might describe there.
Well, the other thing is it all interconnects with ancient history.
Sure.
If you know about medieval history, every single trade or position had a hawk that was associated with them. And the kestrel, for instance, was the lower priesthood's hawk.
Right.
It eventually kind of got put onto heraldry as well, so
Right.
each hawk had a meaning. And that big piece of land, way past the outer edge of the island, as you can see, in the background, that's Mersey, in case you didn't already know.
Sure.
And that piece of land was reclaimed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel in the 1860s, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And he brought with him some engineers from Rochdale. He hadn't really made a name for himself, but he'd made enough of a name for himself to get the job. What had also happened at the time was the light railway that was built to move fruit to London and pick up on the jam factory at Tiptree,
Yeah.
built by Wilkinsons, which were heavily involved with Quakers, who were very involved with social reform. And part of that social reform and the building of the railway finished up with a pier that our local fishermen could then land their catch at any time of the tide, which was, you know, our disadvantage in Tollesbury as opposed to Mersey. And it's the reason why there's no fishing industry here now, and there is still a fishing industry in Mersey now.
Sure.
So that's
What, is the light railway long gone?
Yeah, that was blown up just before the war.
Right.
Now, the excuse was that it was to stop the Nazis from using it as a landing platform.
Right.
But what had also happened at the time was that the J-class racers, the America's Cup Challenge racers, boats like the Endeavour and the Valkyrie, started choosing their crew from the Tollesbury sailors. And they were kind of saying, oh, well, you're the best sailors in the world, which I think was a bit of flattery, to get them to join them. They even built the sailing club and started yachting in Tollesbury. I can remember 3 old boys that were the crew being still alive when I was a child. And one of them had said, yes, on polling day, we were gathered together and we were marched up the village and we were marched into the polling booth and we were told to put an X in the Conservative box. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of the political background.
Sure.
You can see there's a bit of political slogging going on.
Sure.
And I actually believe that it was to
eliminate any social changes
Right.
that were going on here at the time.
Interesting.
Especially, you know, we even had a cooperative here, the world's second one next to Rochdale. So it was looking to be a little socialist area,
Yeah.
and now it's a very, very blue area.
Without a railway.
Without a railway. But with still lots of reclaimed marshland.
I had no idea that Brunel had a link with this landscape. It's
Yes,
wonderful
indeed.
to know. That's amazing. I'm very keen to learn more. The Mersey History Museum has been closed since I moved to the island because of the pandemic. But I'm planning on invading it as soon as I'm able to.
Okay, so am I.
I'll see you there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been doing my own little bits of digging. I mean, I used to live in Crouch End in North London, and I was a member of the Crouch End Historical Society,
Okay.
who were a group who needed somebody to teach them how to use a website, which I very nearly volunteered to do, but then we ended up moving. So, but I love it, you know, getting involved in the history of where you live is really important, I think. I genuinely find it quite difficult to understand people who aren't interested in history, because it's just like, how do you walk down a street and not wonder? And I think that applies anywhere you go, really, anywhere that humans have been. And I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot around the world, and one of the things I find interesting about English history is just how deeply imprinted on the landscape human action is. You know, I grew up in Hampshire, lived in London for a long time, now I'm out here, and I just feel like human action is really deep in the grooves in this part of the world, and I like that. It's kind of cool. It's interesting to me. I know there's archaeological projects, in particular in East Mersey, sort of just continually dredging up Anglo-Saxon and Roman finds, sort of almost on a daily basis from the mud, and that's just sort of mind-bending for me in a good way. It's like it's all still there. You know, people lived here and they lived valid lives that are worth investigating. But somebody told me that the church in West Mersey is one of the only pre-conquest Norman churches in England.
We're actually quite rich in pre-Norman churches in this part of Essex.
Right.
St Peter's on the Wall, or
Yeah.
St Sed's, which dates to about 650.
And is St Peter's on the Wall not the oldest church in England?
I'd say probably the oldest existing complete building.
Right.
At Wigborough, we have a Coptic Hall,
Right.
which was built over, and parts of the building predated St Sed's or St Peter's on the Wall.
It's like Coptic as in Coptic Christian?
Yes, but this Coptic church was a sort of a mixture of early Romano-British Christian as well as the pagan belief system that was left behind after the Romans had left.
Wow. Ancient.
Britain has a dialect called Doric in Scotland, but we all know that that's a Greek dialect. However, the Doric that's in Scotland is part of a Norse dialect. So
Right.
they have lots of Norse words that are added to the local
Sure.
vocabulary. So we've got a lot of confusing
Yeah.
words.
Okay. A lot of my Geordie friends tell me that quite a lot of Geordie slang is traceable to Norwegian.
Yeah. There's still some Celtic words in the Geordie slang or the Geordie local dialects as well.
Amazing. Tell me about this. I'm terrible at plants.
That's borage.
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 And what's that when it's
Let me think. Compositae, I think, is the family of plants it's part of, and that's comfrey. It's used largely as an animal fodder.
Okay, and that's agriculture, that's farm.
Yeah.
Right, okay. It's a beautiful, vivid purple, lilac, I suppose. Should we say lilac? It's a beautiful kind of surprise. We walked down the corner on the seawall and there was a shock of purple awaiting us.
And that those little patches, which grow into quite big patches, are sea lavender. Nothing to do with lavender whatsoever. It just
Similar colour.
Yeah.
Right.
It kind of looks like a heather.
It does. And what would one do with sea lavender if you were a hunter-gatherer?
I should imagine just look at it and admire it.
Right,
As far as I know, I haven't found a use for it or a you know.
Make sea lavender tea, maybe?
There's a possibility.
Let's give it a try. One of the things standing here that I love about this part of the world that I've never really fully investigated, and I'd imagine that you have, there's all this sort of dikes and ditches and little rivulets and channels, and then there's the occasional little wooden bridges and crossings across them and that kind of thing. And it looks a little bit like a kind of the beginning of like a a maze from like a fantasy film or something, and it's like they're where all who
It
enter
certainly
here.
is a fantasy maze, that's for sure.
So presumably there is like a path through,
There are paths.
but you have to know them.
This whole area from the Tollesbury Saltings Limited land over there,
Yeah,
where the boats finish,
yeah.
and right the way across here to the end of the creek up there. That's all owned by the wildfowlers who come and shoot ducks here. These are built just for them to get out there.
But it sort of feels a bit like that only the true of heart could find their way
Very
from one
often,
side
yes.
to the other. Do you know what I mean? Like, right, yeah.
Here in the autumn and winter especially, you have these amazing mists, and you can get lost here even if you're a local.
Sure. Amazing. I love it.
Okay. Would you guys fancy having a little walk out on the marsh just for a,
Why not?
This is as much for you as anybody.
Is there a story behind your stick? I was going to ask.
It was a present for me, and I'm getting old, and I thought I'd put it through its paces today.
Is this salt kind of residue that we're seeing on the ground?
Some of it, yes.
Yeah.
You know when the tide comes up and you get a little bit of scum, which is
Sure.
kind of mixture of all sorts of things, and that sort of settles at high tide and then drops gently. A little hint with the mud walking: if you tread where there's green, it'll be less sinky. You
Okay.
can see there's a green tint on the mud here.
Yeah.
It'll be more firm than the other
Done.
stuff.
Very much feel like we're travellers on a quest now. It doesn't take very long to sort of feel like you're an extremely long way away from,
No.
maybe not civilization because we're walking across bridges and stuff, but urban civilization, let's say that.
Yeah. Isn't it lovely?
Yeah, it's all right.
I mean, you're probably more urban people than me. I have done urban. I didn't get on with it.
I grew up in the countryside and then wanted to be a Londoner because I was into punk rock. There's not
Yeah.
much of that in the countryside.
Ah,
Generally
well,
speaking.
you've moved to the right part of the countryside. Because I'm very into punk rock too.
Excellent.
So,
I've found my middle ground there.
yes, indeed.
Yeah. The Hampshire countryside, not very punk. Shall we say.
There was a little bunch of us that moved into houseboats in the 80s. We were
Right.
known as the marsh punks locally.
I like that. This is amazing. Could you walk to Mersey from here? Or to the edge of the channel, as it were?
You could walk to the edge of the channel, you'd get very sticky.
Right.
And sometimes I like to do it just for the fun of it, or the sheer muddy-mindedness.
Yeah.
Um,
There's somebody leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. Somewhere there's a convict who's got a tattoo of a map of these marshes and how to get from one side to the other. It's amazing though, the landscape.
and that is Samphire. When you pick Samphire, you can use your fingernail, and there's a woody part. That's the end of the woody part there. You can feel down and nip it. You have to have a license to do it commercially, but you know, you're still allowed to pick as much as you like.
What do you do with your samphire when you fix it?
Boil it like asparagus for a couple of minutes, spread butter on it and eat it. You can dig up little tufts of it
Yeah.
and stick it in a trough of fresh water for a couple of days, and then it loses half of its salt content. So, and then of course it can be eaten as it is. Very salty, taste the iodine. It's actually got quite a good taste as it is, and would go well with the salad. So,
I've got to do this now. So we're reaching down to find a woody part.
yeah, clench with your fingernails on the way up to
Yeah.
see where it ends.
And just eat the top of it. Here we
Yeah.
go. This is my first time eating samphire,
Okay.
as far as I'm aware.
You're relatively safe because very few dogs go this way, and the
Now you tell me.
tide washes it every day. But
I
yeah,
enjoyed how you waited until I'd taken a bite before you told me that part.
I had taken the first bite, of course. To
That is true. That is true.
Prove that I wasn't going trying to poison you or anything.
It is very salty. which obviously makes sense, but it's still quite surprising somehow. It's very nice. It's my first step on my road to being a hunter-gatherer.
There we go.
It's a very, very small first step.
You know, at the present, you've got bass and mullet coming up these creeks. So if I were to put a net across there, I'd dam up the creek all the way up there at high tide, and any fish that came back as the tide was going down, I'd come back, low tide, pick the fish out of the nets. I could then pick some samphire, a few salady plants like chickweed, which I could then add mustard to, or the flowers of mallow, borage flowers even, that grows wild, and you can eat the flowers quite easily. Just to liven it up, make it look pretty, and then I've got a meal. This is stuff I really would like to do in the future, is get the hunter-gatherer parties and take them up to my family happy hunting ground at Thuslock Creek, on the other side of the village, a place called Causes, where there is a lot of archeology.
Right.
So I might show, for instance, how to strip nettles and take the strands out and twist them into yarns, and then twist yarns together to make a thread, and twist threads together to make a rope. Very quickly and roughly, of course, because that's very boring. But to give a good idea of how long it would take to make enough yarn for a net or an item of clothing. And then, of course, I'd have some modern net material because of the time it takes, and I'd show how to make a net. And then the key part would be then to set the net in an ideal place where you're going to guarantee yourself a catch, and then go around while you're waiting for the net to fill up and the tide to go down, collecting samphire, spinach, etc., etc., etc. So if it's later in the year, which is usually a better time to go hunter-gathering, you know, if it was an overnight affair with camping, I could say, right, first thing, we build a fire, put stones around the fire, heat them up. Where I'm going to put my camp or tent or whatever, I'd dig up the shingle or stones or mud or whatever and put the warmed stones under the shingle, put the tent on top, so then you have inbuilt central heating. With heated stones, you can then use the same stones to cook fish on, or just simply warm water so that it's easier to bring to the boil. Another thing is there might be a ditch or a creek that cuts through some clay. You could make temporary vessels with which to boil things or do stuff in. So everything you need would be in your environment.
Love it. Camping trip.
That's a widgeon feather. That's what the wildfowlers are after when they come hunting here. Type of duck. Very glad it's not squelchy today.
Yeah, it's pleasantly dry.
Yeah.
Can one track animals around here? Through like trails and stuff?
There
Or
aren't that
birds?
many animals to track,
Right.
but I have been tracking deer occasionally. There's a whole bunch of muntjac deer that skirt the village, and of course the occasional roe deer as well. Some people have said they've seen red deer, and one person has seen a fallow deer in the last 10 years that I know of.
Right.
So yes, you can track them, and of course deer come down here to lick salt. All deer love to have a salt lick.
Amazing.
The muntjac deer go down past my boat because they eat insects as well as vegetation.
Right.
And the insects they're most interested in is the yellow ant. And of course one of the largest yellow ant colonies in the country is on the nature reserve just past my boat.
Oh, really?
So I've seen them coming as far as my boat and a bit beyond.
For a gourmet slap-up meal?
Yeah.
Love it.
with a bit of condiment.
Yeah. That nearly went badly.
Yeah, always follow the green on the marshes. Had we had tides covering for a few days, you'd have been sort of nearly at your ankles and that last stretch.
So you said we're heading up to an archaeological site up here?
Yes.
What sort of period?
Iron Age Roman.
Okay.
And we might be able to find a little bit of pottery.
That would be very exciting.
But yes, this site goes back prior to the Roman invasion.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the Red Hills were around the Roman invasion and after. This is where I was saying there's a double piece of sea wall.
Right.
Um,
You said a midden?
Midden, yes. There was stuff deposited up until about sort of 70 years ago, but for around a 200-year period.
Right.
All the local bottle digging enthusiasts completely and utterly excavated it.
Right.
So it isn't what it was.
I found an inkwell and a pipe
Okay.
in my garden when I was a kid and was convinced I was going to go on the Antiques Roadshow and make like £1 million. But it turns out they're exceedingly common Victorian clay inkwell and pipe. Right.
Still nice things to find though.
Oh, it was always fine, but my dreams of unknown riches were dashed.
Right, here we are. Okay, this is where there's an Iron Age Romano-British red hill. You can see a bit of change in the colour of the mud around here. That's mostly the area there where they dug,
Right.
and to get to it, you kind of climb down the seawall there, and the mud is particularly pongy in that corner.
Right.
But yes,
So this is excavation site.
this
as
is
well.
an excavated red hill site.
Amazing.
So,
So the red hills are salt related.
yes, they're
Mm.
the salterns.
Right. And so people are. I mean, do we say they're mining salt, or they're not, it's not really mining, is it? It's panning.
Well, you could call it mining because salt
Yeah.
is a mineral, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. But then they're mining it as a resource,
Yes.
which they are then going to trade,
Yes.
as well as use, obviously.
Yes.
Amazing.
We
It's quite-
could take a little trek down because we're not disturbing anything.
Yeah. Sure.
If anybody fancies walking through stinky mud.
Let's see how we go. But it's difficult to pick out from the rest of the creeks, unless you know what you're looking for, presumably.
Yes. This is where having a reasonable local knowledge helps.
It is quite pongy.
You got a whiff there, didn't you?
I did.
And that's its natural smell.
Right.
Oh, it's good. This is usually squelchy, and this is where it really hums.
Right. So we've come on a
Been
good
quite
day for
firm.
this,
We have indeed.
in terms of my shoes.
Yes. Wow.
Whoa.
It's kind of silted up amazingly since I was here last, but that was hundreds of years ago.
This is crazy.
Can we find you a piece of pottery?
You're wearing heavier duty boots than me, so I'm going to let you
Yeah.
do the actual excavating
Gonna
archaeology
just,
part.
Let's see. Used to be able to walk over here, and the whole surface was scattered with little bits of pottery. There are little tiny fragments in the middle of the creek where I can't quite reach.
Yeah.
And also, you know, it would be falling out of the banks. Very red mud.
Is that pottery?
It's not pottery, but it's where there's so much pottery of the red clay that it's stained
Right.
the mud. And this is why they're called red hills. I want to find you a piece of pottery.
There's chunks of stuff just down here.
That looks like a bit, doesn't it? I'm gonna.
Are you taking your shoes and socks off? Your stick's serving its purpose now.
Stone. Oh, there's a bit. Oh, there's a few bits.
It's a big old handful you're getting there.
I hope so. It's got to be worth the effort, hasn't it?
Do you need a hand? Do you want to grab those?
That's one handful.
One handful. And some very muddy feet. So this is properly Romano,
British, yes.
British.
Sort
The work
of-
of human hands
Yes,
from many thousands of years ago.
yes.
Well,
2,000
yeah,
roughly.
2,000 years ago. Should we say 2,500? Look at that. Now the real question is, can anyone rebuild the pot? They're presumably made from clay from round here.
Yeah. They'd make big thick dishes with which to either bake or dehydrate the seawater in order to
Get salt, right?
get the salt.
Yeah. That would have been kiln fired.
Yes.
Right.
Very roughly kiln fired
Yeah,
as
sure.
well.
That's absolutely amazing. Look at that.
There we go. Now, this is the interesting thing here is that 20 years ago when I first came here, you could pick up bits this big
Size of your hand.
and, you know, thick.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is all fragmented. I think the other thing is that there may have been other souvenir hunters. There we are. There's a
That's a sizable
largest
chunk.
bit there.
Look at that. That's amazing. It's covered in goop as well. Love it. That's the technical term. Goop.
Oh, that's the correct term, I'm sure.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
archaeologists, whatever they call it, they've got it wrong
It's goop.
if they don't call it goop.
Yeah. Man, there's something really quite sort of powerful about holding something that was created by human hand a very long time ago.
Yes.
It's sort of, it telescopes time
Yeah.
suddenly. In a quite a vertiginous way, you're suddenly, you know.
The telescoping of time. I do like that expression. I'll have to utilise that.
Please do.
Thank you.
I've got mud all over my hands now. The city boy in me is filled with ick. Amazing. So I mean, if I was to wash these,
Yeah.
would they be redder?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. A little scrub with a toothbrush.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Amazing. I'm going to take this home and wash them.
your souvenir of the day.
My day's gone with a bang. Oh, look at that. Lovely.
When I eventually give up smoking properly, I'm going to harvest this plant, which is called Daucus carota, or wild carrot. It contains a substance called azarone, which helps you resist, what's the word? Resist urges? Resist cravings.
Amazing.
It's also got, slightly narcotic, slightly hallucinogenic, and slightly stimulant, depending on the quantity you use. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful with it, but at least I'll have fun giving up smoking.
Yeah.
It is what real carrots originated as,
Right.
and the root is white, like a parsnip.
Could you eat it?
Yes, but it's very much stringier, and you have to get it at the right time of year.
Right. But it's a native plant.
It is, yes.
Right.
Okay, and the reservoir's behind this group of trees.
How old is this reservoir?
I think this is about 100 years old, and it was created to feed the strawberry plants and orchards that were planted by the Wilkinsons' jam factory
Right.
in the area. So they've had quite a big influence here over the last century and a bit.
More borage?
More borage, yes.
Borage, yeah. I remember the word. It's never happened before.
So what do you like with singing? Do you make it up as you go?
I know. But I get to choose the words at the beginning anyway, so I just choose ones I can remember.
Chamomile?
Chamomile, so black tea.
Usually these fields, well, there's some fields over the other side that are often planted with borage, and the local beekeeper in Church Street puts a load of hives all round them. kind of a symbiotic help the farmer, help the beekeeper. Somewhere in here, I think you can see some there. There's some quince trees. I think this one's a quince tree too.
Right.
There you are, yes. These were all planted for the jam factory. And quince helps other jams and jellies coagulate. So it's kind of an emergency ingredient if jam's too runny.
Right.
Another one is hawthorn, but not a lot of people use those these days.
Right.
And hawberries you can squash up and then dissolve in water and leave it to soak, and then you get rid of all of the seed and skin debris and leave it, and it'll dry and turn into a jelly,
Right.
which eventually you can turn over, and then it dries into a thick leathery substance that you can cut into strips and make fruit leathers out of,
Wow.
which have been
Like fruit jerky,
yeah.
as it were. Yeah. Amazing.
That's a piece of Roman roof tile because one edge of it's flaked away, and you've got that dark piece that's usually in the middle.
Right.
That's an indication of the temperatures that they fired them at. So yeah, if you find a few of these in an area, that'll be a scatter, and it's a sign that there was probably some kind of building
Right. It's
in
amazing.
the area.
Just wandering past it.
Your eyes kind of get sharpened to it after a while.
Of course,
And-
with
and-
with
well,
experience and training, as it were. Yeah.
I suppose it's like hunter-gatherers, you know. When you first go out looking for your quarry, you don't see it, but you need to train yourself up to
Sure.
maximise your efficiency.
Yeah. What a beautiful summer's evening.
Yes. Shall we walk this way? So what I'm going to show you in a minute is a set of trees, oak trees.
Right. Okay.
These have not grown in my entire lifetime any bigger than they are. They're sessile oaks, which are a native species that are relatively saltwater friendly. They don't seem to mind it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't kill them outright unless they're completely swamped like the tree over there. And these are a little bit raised, as you can see on the whatever wall that was.
Yeah. Do we know how old the wall is?
No, this could be old seawall.
Yeah.
But why would they build the new seawall behind it and not incorporate it?
Yeah.
Because you've got less digging to do and you've got a natural dike between it. I'm not sure on that one, but, you know, if an oak tree grows that thick from seed in 40 years, you know, imagine how tight the grain is on that.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because presumably one can count rings. Is that a thing?
Yes.
Yeah. And so one could like bore a hole and count rings and that, but they
Yeah.
would be quite tightly packed.
Yeah, you'd probably not be able to on those.
Right.
And these are kind of a rare thing. It's something that's making me ask all sorts of questions.
Sure.
How old are they? Are there any tree experts that could come along and give us a little bit of enlightenment? I like to think I know a bit about trees, but
I feel like I'm letting you down again. I've got enough flower trees to help out on this.
you know, they're kind of growing almost as twisted and gnarled as a big oak.
But they're almost like bonsai.
Exactly.
Bonsai oak.
Yeah,
Now that you point them out, they're really distinctive.
we better not publish this actually, because if they are natural bonsais, did you ever watch Kung Fu Kid was it Kung Fu Kid?
Karate Kid.
Karate Kid, that's
Yeah.
the one. Where the old man, who's the bonsai,
Mr. Miyagi.
yes, he takes them out to a cliff and they find a bonsai tree
Yeah.
that's a natural bonsai,
Yeah.
and it's worth thousands of pounds, and the baddies are trying to get it too.
Right.
There is a plant here I'd just like to quickly show you. Quite common, so we can pick a bit. And this has got the Victorian name of lad's love. It's sea wormwood, Artemisia maritima. It actually contains quite a large amount of absinthe like normal wormwood does, and can be used to kill worms as a narcotic. Apparently, It is an antivenom for wasp stings.
Right.
Remembering things like sea wormwood would be very important historically because it gets rid of worms,
Yeah.
which would have been a problem and a hazard to health. And the reason why it's called lad's love is if you take a bit and rub it and smell it, it was made into posies for girls to put under their pillows or into their...
Oh yeah. Wow, it smells very strong.
Yeah, you can smell
So
it.
you said it had absinthe.
Yes.
So could one brew a drink from this
Yes.
that would get you drunk,
Yes.
extremely drunk?
Perhaps even affect you in a more narcotic fashion.
Yeah, more sort of hallucinogenic.
Maybe not quite, but yes.
Not far off. Yeah.
Yeah, not far off.
Now you've piqued my interest. That smells amazing.
This is kind of where the creek would have finished.
Right.
And you can see the rise in the landscape. So at the highest high tides, this would have been covered.
Wow.
In the 1952 floods, when the water came over the sea wall, the way my dad described it is that the water would have been about 4 feet high here as we are now.
Crazy.
So the last bit,
Yeah.
the raised road, I suspect remnants of ancient causeway.
Like a strood,
Yes.
as it were. Yeah. Because the word strood is generic, right? It's used to the one going to Mersey, but it is a thing, a strood, right?
I didn't know that.
I'm told that a strood just means causeway
Okay.
in Anglo-Saxon. So-
Okay, I'm gonna check that out because I've
Okay.
actually got a book of Anglo-Saxon English. An early thing to have.
Then you can correct me.
Not necessarily correct you, but there were kind of various Anglo-Saxon dialects as well.
Right.
It also is probable that it had another meaning, so always good to learn.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Strood isn't the original route onto the island,
Oh, really?
and I've wanted to look this up, and I wanted to go to the Mersey Museum to do so. So I think I can feel a trip to Mersey going on when you're less busy, perhaps.
Yes, that would be lovely. Or we'll exchange numbers.
Yes, indeed. So yes, you can see here, pretty much this is the extent of the boatyard as it
Right.
was 80 or 100 years ago.
What would you call this?
Woodrolf,
Oh, Woodrolf. Okay, right.
or Woodup, or Woodrope. There's an obvious thing with the Wooden and Rope and Boats
Yeah,
Association
sure.
there. I think we've done quite well. We've covered a lot,
Yeah.
haven't we?
We've been from the Bronze Age to Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Yes.
That's a sweep.
It is a bit. There's a hell of a lot more to do.
Oh, of course. Always.
I can see why having you with us doing this has really helped, because you kind of asked the questions that I don't usually think of answering.
No, I mean, it's fascinating, man. It really is. We should do more of it. Even after our short excursion, I feel like I can see a few more things.
Yeah.
Just seems it's sort of obvious now. Whereas I suspect if I walked right down here without you in the first place, I probably wouldn't have noticed. More fool me.
I feel like a good guide, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. Thank you, guys. Drop us a line next time we're in Mersey.
Next time. Oh, lovely.